Hi, my name is Nancy, and I'm a gratefully recovering compulsive eater, and I'd like to welcome you to 12th OA workshop presented by the Region Chairs. I am currently privileged to serve Overeaters Anonymous' Region 2 Chair. Please help me open our meeting with the Serenity Prayer. God, grant us the serenity to accept the things we cannot change, the courage to change the things we can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Today, the topic that we're addressing is relapse and recovery. So I'm just going to give you a little bit of a background. I came into Overeaters Anonymous a long time ago. As a matter of fact, I've just been privileged to, in September, to mark 41 years in OA. And I came in, and despite the fact that it was new, it took me about 13 months, but I've lost about 150 pounds. There was no intergroup in Michigan at that time, and toward the end of my first year was when the intergroup started forming. And during that time, before it got formed, there were people that would go from meetings to meetings, and we only had there were only 2 meetings when I came into Detroit, when I came into program. One was on a Friday night, and one was on Monday morning at what later became my sponsor's house. By the time we finished, when they started the intergroup, we had about 10 meetings that formed the intergroup. So meetings were just exploding like popcorn all over the place. But people went to different meetings as they started up, and if you had any physical recovery at all, they asked you to come and share at their meetings in support of their meetings and helping them get off the ground. And so that's what I did. I had followed the old gray sheet food plan, which is very, very low carbohydrates. It's very restrictive, but the weight had just absolutely dripped off. And I was over 325 pounds when I got here. So naturally, I displayed some recovery physically, and so I started speaking at different meetings. I went to at least 2 meetings a week, but I got cocky. After I'd been in program just about 2 years, I had success. Of course, thought I could handle everything now without even knowing it. And I don't know about you, but my disease is cunning, baffling, and powerful, and it always hits me on my blind side. And I still thought it was about the food. I knew that I was growing spiritually, but I didn't realize just how powerful my obsession was. I was at a Thanksgiving dinner just a little over 2 years in program. When the food was being passed around, someone offered me a sweet potato. Without even thinking twice, I said, sure, I can handle that. When the sweet potato basket was passed around, I took a sweet potato. I thought, well, I'm going to be a good girl, and I'm only going to have a half of one. Because I was, by this time, working back toward maintenance. And in those days, when we did maintenance, we had to add foods back so that we could see how they affected our body and affected our program. I took a sweet potato and had the sweet potato. And it wasn't even candied. It was just plain old baked sweet potato. And I had a vague sense that I shouldn't be doing that, but I did it anyway. Sure enough, the effect was disastrous because by the time Christmas arrived, I had already returned to the sugar and the flour and all the Christmas goodies that came out. I had gotten back into them. But the thing that is really important to me to remember is that I took that sweet potato out of self-will that day because I had called my sponsor and reported my food that morning, and yet it did not contain that particular food item. And so when the basket of potatoes was passed, I took the sweet potato on my own will. And that's how I found out how cunning, baffling, and powerful this disease is. I called up my sponsees the next morning and said, I'm sorry, I broke my abstinence and I can't sponsor you anymore. And hung up the phone as I was hearing, but wait. And then went off on my own. Did I call my sponsor to report that? No, because that's another facet of the program that started in on me immediately, and that is that after a little over 2 years of moving out of the isolation and enjoying the freedom of recovery, I started building my own prison again. built the walls, 4 walls that locked me in, and they were of guilt, fear, embarrassment, and shame. And I was ashamed and afraid to call my sponsor, not because she would be heavy-handed with me or heavy-hearted, because I was feeling so guilty and so ashamed of myself. And that's another thing that my disease will do to me. I am a compulsive eater. I was one, I am one, and I will always be one. But I didn't realize that at the time, see. And so I operated in those, and I stopped going to meetings. I had become the region where I lived, I had become their darling. And I had given up a lot of my home meetings because 5 nights a week I was out speaking at meetings, and see. And so what I did was I tripped over my own ego and fell right into a relapse. I knew everybody in the greater Detroit area, and that was more of the shame and the embarrassment, and I didn't want to get back to meetings. So along I went. I kept promising myself that I was going to go back to meetings because I knew that's where I needed to be, but somehow or another, those walls kept getting higher and higher, and I couldn't climb over them to get myself back to a meeting. This went on for 5 months. Once a month, I would get a phone call from the woman who had started the meetings in the greater Detroit area. She wasn't even my sponsor. And I would get a call from her, and she'd say, "Hi, I've been thinking about you, and I just wondered if you're okay and if everything is okay." She didn't offer me any pressure. She didn't try to make me come clean. She just wanted to let me know that she had been thinking of me. And that really made a big difference. I will never forget that. And I would always offer some excuse like, "Oh, my husband's schedule changed at work," or I had a young baby, and I'd say, "Oh, the baby kept me up all night," or whatever, but I'll get back. I'll get back. And it just didn't happen. So she still kept this up. Every once a month she would call and do an outreach call, and every month I would give her some wild-eyed excuse and thank her for calling. Didn't call my sponsor, wouldn't talk to my sponsor when she called me, because I'm going to do it my way. About 5 months went by, 4 months. 4 months went by, and I was in the supermarket one day, and when I rounded the corner, here was this same woman who had been calling me every month at the end of the aisle. And I was like shot out of a cannon. I almost ran down that aisle. And when I got to her, I said, "Hi." And she, of course, was hi, and we exchanged cordialities and whatever. And I said to her, first question out of my mouth was, "Is that meeting still at your house on Monday morning?" See, it was a small meeting. And what my plan was to go back in a small meeting and just kind of slide up into the chair like a snake and say, "Nothing happened, I'm okay." And when a newcomer walked through the door, say, "Oh, welcome to OA, welcome home." And it didn't quite work that way. She said, "No, it's not working." She said, we discontinued that meeting because a lot of people's schedules changed and their kids started school and whatever, and so it didn't work out well. And she said, "But there's another meeting in an adjacent city that's really good, and I know you'd like it." And she told me where it was, and I said, "Oh, wonderful, I'll be there." And it was on a Monday morning, same as hers had been. So I was so anxious, but still in a great deal of fear and embarrassment and shame. So it took me a month before I could go back to that meeting, only after I had run down the street to a neighbor who outweighed me by 50 pounds and said to her, "Would you like to go to an OA meeting with me?" thinking she was going to say, "No, I've done all that stuff." And she said, "Yes, I would." So my conniving mind, which is also part of my disease, said, "Oh, great." So I said, "I'll pick you up Monday morning." And on my way out to my car, I thought, I know what I'll do. I'll push her through the door first so that she's bigger than me, and when she goes through, everybody will say, "Oh, wow," and nobody will shame me or go, "Oh, look at Nancy. She was so thin and she was so well in recovery." They won't even pay any attention to me because they'll see my friend, and then I can slide up to the chair and act like nothing had ever happened and just say, "Welcome to OA, welcome home." Well, that's the way I tried to do it. And we went the following Monday morning, and I went in, and it didn't go like I had planned at all. Nobody shamed me. Nobody shamed her. People were friendly, and they welcomed us. There were people there that I had known from the other meeting, and they never challenged me at all, except for one lovely black lady was there. I think she's passed away now, but she said to me, you know what? She said it privately to me. She said, we've all felt your pain. Welcome back. And they read a reading that we had in OA then called Welcome Back. All I could do was sit there and cry because I knew that it had been my own undoing. OA was still my last house on the block. It was still my last hope. And so while I was out eating, my first sponsor had also left OA. Unfortunately, she's never returned. I saw the woman that had spoken to in the supermarket, and I asked her if she would be my sponsor. She said yes, under two conditions. Number one, she said, you've got to work the steps. And she said, you've got to work them thoroughly and completely, because it's not the food that's going to save you. It's the working of the 12 steps of Overeaters Anonymous. And she has said, and the other thing is that you must be as honest with me as you can be. And she said, and if something goes wrong, don't get into the guilt and the embarrassment and the shame. And she said, just dust off your hands and move on. But always let me know and be honest. And so with those two premises in mind, I left there. And when I walked out of that, all I could do was sit there and sob when they read, Welcome to OA, welcome home. When I walked out of that meeting, I knew that there was hope for me. And I also knew that the walls had been knocked down from just being in that meeting. I no longer had to do it myself because I was there with people who loved and cared for me, who had taken the time once a month to give me a call and say, how are you doing? Otherwise, I'd probably still be eating my face off. And I don't know what my top weight would be because I think I would probably eat myself to death. So it's very important that I read my literature. And if you go on OA.org, there's a lot of literature that can lead you and help you with relapse and recovery. And it does me anyway. And sometimes when I start to get cocky and think, oh, I'm going to change this food today after what I've committed. And today, after all this time, I have a different sponsor because I'm living in California now. But I call her on an as-needed basis because both of us found out several years ago that I don't need really to call her because I have done my steps. I've gone through my steps, and I go through them continually. So I call her on an as-needed basis. And I can tell if my feet hit the floor in the morning and something isn't right, and it may not be hunger. It may be that something is just wrong. That's when I have to call my sponsor. That's my as-needed sign. And sometimes all I can say is, I don't know what's going on with me, but I'm going to commit an abstinent day until I find out if there's something I can do to change it. Most of the time, that feeling is gone, but I never know where it'll take me. It's usually gone by noon anyway, but I have my food plan. I still have a food plan, and I stick to it. It's changed over the years. I'm now a vegetarian, and I have been for like 30 years. I've had to make some changes there, but those were all because I came to it. And I'm comfortable making those changes now after I have run it by my sponsor. There's no more sweet potato abstinence type thing, but I run it by her and say, here's a change I'd like to make. And when I went vegetarian, that was one of the things that I talked to her about. And so at any rate, anytime it's necessary for me to change my food, I find that I'd better check with a voice that has a little more sanity than mine that day. And even if it means weighing and measuring again, I haven't done that in years. But if it means that I have to weigh and measure it that day because my sponsor's not available or something else is wrong, I know that I have the freedom to do that. Overeaters Anonymous has given me an experience that could have been disastrous, but by the grace of God and the fellowship of this program, I was able to get back. And so, and I'm enjoying recovery today. And I've gone through medications that have put weight on me. That's the most recent difficulty that I went through. I've gone through lifestyle changes from married with children to I'm almost literally an orphan now. And so there's a lot of things that I've changed, and of course when those big changes come, my food world gets rocked, but I don't have to honor that anymore. I have a method by which I can reclaim sanity, and today I'm living a good life. It's not free of challenges, but it's a good life, and I'm comfortable in the sense that I know what I'm going to eat today, and I know that my food is clean, and I know that it's healthy eating, with the exception of some of the medical changes I've had within the last couple of years and the pharmaceutical things that I've had to do that have put about 15 pounds on me, and I spaced at that, but you know what? I worked with my sponsor, and I found out that God's going to take care of that. She reminds me constantly that I only have one job that I have to do today, and that's to stay abstinent, and God will do the rest. So I want to thank you for allowing me to share with you. What I would like to mention is if you go to OA.org and go to the bookstore, you'll find a variety of pamphlets that are good, and they are encouraging, and they're very helpful for coming out of relapse and going into recovery. The OA 12 and 12 is wonderful. So you can find a variety of these pamphlets that you can do. And most of the time, I mean, of course, you can order them online. They're available at our meetings and intergroups. And things like Before You Take the First Compulsive Bite, that's a really good pamphlet. There's also a Plan of Eating. That's it. There's a Plan of Eating. Commitment to Abstinence is also a good one. There's also a pamphlet on relapse and recovery. And so I would encourage you, that if you're struggling with relapse, regardless to how long, you certainly do have information that will be helpful. The 12 and 12 is the most ideal source that I've found, and I found that every time I read that 12 and 12, I find something new. This is a monthly workshop, by the way, and this workshop is presented by the region chairs. And so we have been taking turns all year, and the topic that we've been focusing on is abstinence and various aspects of it. Starting next year, we're going to have a little bit different format, which I'll tell you about a little bit later, but I'm the tail that's wagging the dog today. I learned very quickly that I can't trust my own ego, and I can't trust myself to make food choices that are not committed. There again, the commitment is not for my sponsor. The commitment is for my discipline. Because when it came to eating anything, I was so undisciplined that I couldn't believe it. And I didn't know it until I got to OA. And OA introduced me to discipline through committing my food every day. It introduced me to accountability. It introduced me to spirituality. I grew up in a religious home, and yet when I got to OA, I confused religious with spirituality. So there were a lot of things that I had to change, but still there was a remnant of that thinking I can do it myself that stayed with me. And that sweet potato was just a symbol of self-will and riot. Because I eat sweet potatoes today, and I don't have to commit them before each meal. That was part of the thing that came up with my going vegetarian, was, can I have them? But the fact is that I worked through that with a sponsor and let her know. So I pretty much know today what I can eat and what I can't. And I should say, not what I can't, what I won't. And that gives me the freedom to make choices. If I say I can't have something, then I'm limiting my options. And one of the things that she taught me, and then my sponsor here in California taught me, is this is not a can or a cannot program. It's a will or a will not program. It's a program of choices. And I had to start looking at it that way. Because if I stay in that can/cannot routine, I'm going to take my will back anyway, because there's something inside my disease way down in the pits that says, don't tell me what I can do and what I can't do. But if I take it to the realm of just simply saying to myself, I won't eat that today, or I will eat this today, that means I've made a good choice. And that's another kind of thing that kind of guides me into making good choices, is to know that I can. I never thought that before. I ate because I had to eat. And so that's part of the spirituality of this program to me, is the ability to make better choices in my food. And it doesn't have to be self-will run riot. When I go through the market, or one of my favorite things to do is to watch these cooking shows, the chef schools on TV, and I just look at watching those and watching the discipline that they have to do to become a chef, and the creativity that they have to use in pairing foods together and executing them well. And I think, gosh, OA's been teaching me that for over 40 years. How to make good choices, how to prepare them, how to set the table, even though I'm by myself, instead of standing up at the kitchen counter. When I'm unsure of what I'm doing with something new, I weigh and measure it. And I've worked that out with my sponsor, too. I weigh and measure it and say, okay, this is it. Win, lose, or draw, this is what I get. So sometimes it's those little things that make this so cunning, baffling, and powerful for me. Most of the time, I don't have those challenges anymore. But then there's something that says, sometimes I encounter some food or whatever that says, you better check this one first. I love farmers markets, but I'm finding that, especially with the drought that we've had in California, there's a lot of vegetables and fruits that I can't get that we used to have. And so they're pushing vegetables, because they're the only things that grow in drought conditions. They're pushing vegetables that are popular in other countries. Well, I don't know what those are going to do for me. So I don't, and many of them will give you samples, and so taste-wise, there's a lot of them that are on the spot. If I have a leaf of something, and I taste it and I don't like the way it tastes, well, I know that that's not going to be for me. But then there's the other ones that seem to taste okay, and so I make a note of it. And I, before I go to that farmer's market again, I come home and I talk to my sponsor and I say, what do you think about this? And she'll give me her input, and then I still get to make a choice. But we kind of operate on the theory that when in doubt, leave it out, which is exactly what they did when I got to program. Even though at the very beginning, I renounced sugar and white flour at the suggestion of the people in the OA meeting. Those were the only two things that I had to renounce, and that was a choice. But as I've gone on in program, of course, I'm older, I'm aging. Sometimes I have to reevaluate food choices because of the aging factor. But still in all, I still run it by my sponsor and say, what do you think? And my sponsor has got 45 years of abstinence. And she has a sponsor that has 47 years of abstinence. And so I kind of figure they're good people, to have around and to be able to work things out with. See? But it's rare. It's rare that I have to make these food changes, and it's rare that I find a food that I'd like to try. I don't think I would have been here today if it wasn't for that woman who took the time to call me once a month, and nobody asked her to do it, and she wasn't a calling committee. It was just that she cared. It made all the difference in the world. It's that contact, it's that personal contact that keeps our boats afloat, right? What a great idea on the 12-12. I do know that a couple of intergroups here in California had a Day in OA event on 12-12, and it was sponsored by their 12-Step Within committees. So it's still alive and well and working. But those are good places also to go back in and to go to a special event. Starting in January, it's going to be about the steps. We're going to take a step a month. and talk about that, you're welcome to join that. You can find all of these by going on OA.org. They're listed there. And according to our seventh tradition, each group is supposed to be fully self-supporting through our own contributions. We would encourage you to make a contribution for today's workshop as well as any other online or virtual meetings that you might go to. Today's asks that you would use number P88516, and you can do that online. They have a system set up online where you can pay it online and you can make a contribution to the World Service Office, because despite the fact that we don't have any expenses, we still are part of OA as a whole. And OA as a whole needs to have our contributions, even if it's $1 or $2, hopefully $3 at every meeting, whatever we can afford to give. And our World Service Office needs our support to help carry the message to other compulsive eaters. They provide the website, provide a date book calendar so people can find workshops as well as meetings. That meeting list is worldwide, and it's really comprehensive. And they provide OA literature, activities that go on, like at the holidays, every holiday. Actually, your intergroup can register those on the website, and people will be able to see the activities that you have, whether it's a special meeting or whether it's just a monthly thing. We have an intergroup here in California that has a day in OA every month, and every month they have a different topic. And they're wonderful, and they bring speakers in from all over the place. The World Service Office also assembles the quarterly newsletter. We have email distribution for important information for members. You know what? When I stop and think of all the money that I spent in the bakery, I used to drop $40, $50 at a time. This is in the late 60s, early 70s, under the guise of taking it home and putting it in the freezer for my family. And it actually never met the freezer. And I would be back in later on that week, within 3 or 4 days, doing the same thing over and over again. Would that I had, or OA had, the money that I spent doing that. I've often thought about that. What price my freedom from compulsive eating? I have to give as my life depends upon it. And so do you, and any member of OA, because look at the gifts that we've been given, and that's the freedom from the sweet potatoes, if nothing else. Check out the datebook calendar on www.oa.org for more virtual workshops, because they're popping up all over the place. I'd like to remind you that the opinions expressed here today are those of the individual OA members, and they do not represent OA as a whole. Thank you, ladies, for joining us.